We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday. Monday was a humdinger, as we old people would say. Now, there were some things going on that we need to talk about. Some future things going on this week because of what happened Monday, we need to talk about. So, plenty of material for this podcast. Got some emails too, and I'm looking forward to that. I always enjoy reading the emails from listeners. I think what they have to say is valuable, and I think it adds quite a lot to the podcast. I wanted to talk about something else real briefly before we get into this, and I've talked about this before. I've told you I go through TikTok a lot. I get a lot of interesting tips on stories, and then I go further down the rabbit hole, if you will, to try to find more information about said stories. But one of the things that I'm seeing on TikTok a lot as of late, at least with the people I watch on a regular basis, is these infighting between creators. And I never understood that really because I don't really have any interactions with most creators, maybe one or two. And I wouldn't say we're best buddies and talk on the phone and do all that stuff. But there are some people who claim to do that, and that's fine. You know, if it works out for you, that's fine. But whenever you have these personal interactions with other creators, inevitably there's going to be some, I don't know, arguments or fights or disagreements or whatever. And, you know, when you and I have disagreements with whoever's in our life, we just do it, we go on, and it's no big deal because it's our business. It's nobody else's business. But as of late, I'm seeing these little fights going on between creators, and it annoys me. And I'll tell you why it annoys me is because to me, it's the epitome of arrogant. You did what you did on TikTok, and people came to watch you because they liked it and they appreciated it. Now you get to a point where you think it's all about you, not about what you're delivering, and you think people care about your personal little fights and arguments with whoever. And then that spurs somebody else to say, well, he's getting attention with that, so I'm going to argue with him as well. It's fucking annoying. Now, there are two guys right now that I follow, and you probably follow both of them too. I'm not going to give their names because it's not necessary. You probably know. But they're two pretty big creators, and they're arguing over a previous problem that one of the creators had. And they're going back and forth at one another. And this is why it bothers me. As I say, I think it's like the ultimate sense of arrogance, or somebody who gets caught up in their own fame, if you will. And when I say fame, I don't mean real fame. There is no fame on TikTok. Some people have a lot of followers, some people don't. Doesn't make anybody better than anybody else. But, you know, if you've got a lot of followers, you might perceive yourself as being famous. I don't perceive that. I don't care. Fame doesn't mean fucking anything. But these two will go back and back and forth. And for the most part, I would presume that they are on the same page with most things, but this little personal thing is a big deal. Look, when I go onto TikTok, if I see creator one or creator two come up, I expect to get a certain kind of programming, if you will. But then when I get this diddling around with this personal shit, I get fucking annoyed. And that's why I try on TikTok. I don't interact personally with other TikTok creators because, you know, they don't have any interest in talking to me, and that's cool. I don't have any interest in talking to them. I just do my little song and dance, my little monkey show, and I do what I do, and you get what you expect when you come to me on TikTok. Same could be said for the podcast as well. It's a little different though, because this is kind of my show, and I've got more freedom to do what I need to do. I just wish people would understand when you do something on TikTok or radio or anything else, and you have any amount of success with it, the worst thing you can do is change it up. Why not stick what works for you? But you let your ego and all this shit go in and get, you know, somebody calls somebody else something else, and then it becomes a shit show. I get people talking shit about me all the time, and I don't care. Don't care. Because when I go on TikTok, I got one job. It's to give you what you expect. And that's what I'm going to do every time. I'm not going to get this into a personal thing. It's, there's no point. There's no point in it. From time to time, I will get people to say, would you duet um, my TikTok? And I'll do that to give them a boost, whatever. Uh, but don't ask me 100 times to do it because I'm not going to do it. The best thing you can do when you're on TikTok, do not worry about numbers. Don't worry about followers. Don't worry about likes. All you really have to do is do your job, provide your content, improve that content, and be consistent with the content, and the numbers will come. The numbers will be whatever they're going to be. Don't try to manufacture clout or numbers. Don't worry about the numbers. The numbers aren't really important if your content is good. And when these creators who know how to create good content decide instead, I'm going to turn this into a personal thing and I'm going to argue with somebody else because they might think, well, this is good TikTok or good internet because we got this conflict. It turns into kind of like a soap opera. For you young people, soap opera is something we used to watch on television that was overly dramatic, and it was on every day. I just wanted to bring this up because I want to assure you something. When you watch TikTok or even on the podcast, I'm not going to pull in personal situations. You don't give a shit about my personal things that I don't like. I don't like Donald Trump and the Republicans, but we can all agree on that. We're all on the same page with that. I'm not going to ever get into a situation where you have to pick sides. Well, I like Mike because I like him better, but I like him too. Fuck that. That's stupid. That's stupid. Both these guys probably have similar followers. Now you're making these followers pick a side. So somebody's going to lose followers. It's just fucking stupid. I don't get it. And there's really no entertainment value in it unless you're into the gossip and the scandal of it all. It's just people can take anything they're doing and be successful at it and then fuck it up. Well, I want you to know I'm duller than that and I'm not stupid, so I ain't gonna fuck it up. I'm gonna do what I always fucking do. And put it this way, these two guys I follow, but if this shit continues, I'm not gonna follow them anymore because that's not what I'm looking for. Anyway, let's get down to business. We do have some emails. First one starts, hey, Boomer, this data sampling certainly wouldn't hold up to a chi-square or a chi-square. Who said I'd never use that in life? I don't even know what the fuck that means. That's above my head. You're going to have to send me an email, explain that to me. Anyway, I'll continue. But it was statistically significant to me. I had opportunity recently to drive through a lot of rural Pennsylvania, deep Maglafuck country. And I saw almost no Trump 2024 signs and not even any of those crazy flags and signs everywhere in houses. I saw two old weathered Trump Pence signs. Those people I always want to stop and knock and say, hey, that one motherfucker tried to fake the Christian guy or tried to have the fake Christian guy hung, right? But that's a good way to get a 12 gauge pointed at you in those parts. So I keep driving and turn up the radio instead. Best, Jeff. Yeah, you're right. It's better not to engage with these fucks. I will say this. I've been through rural Pennsylvania, beautiful country. Trump LaFlux aside, when I went through there, Trump wasn't a thing. So I didn't have to worry about that. But it's a beautiful country. But even here in Minnesota and some other places I've been, you would get those areas that were just replete with Trump signs and ridiculous shit. We had a guy maybe 15 miles from my house that owned a company that tore down buildings, and he had this huge crane. And at the top of that huge crane, he had like a 50 or 75 foot flag that said Trump 2020. Well, the city told him to take it down. He said, fuck yourself. And then they started fining him $1,000 a day until he took it down. He stood strong for a while. He doubled down, he tripled down, but eventually he took it down. And I haven't seen it since. You're right. You're not seeing as many Trump signs and flags and all that shit. And I think this goes to the media. You know, if the media had their way, they would make you think that Donald Trump is neck and neck with Joe Biden. And that's not possible. Not fucking possible. But they got to create this competition or this upcoming battle, if you will. It's not going to be a battle. Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes in 2020. If he's the nominee, and I'm not convinced he will be, if he is, he'll lose by more than 7 million votes, significantly more than 7 million votes. Of all the people that could run against Joe Biden, I hope it's Donald Trump because he is a sure win. I think in reality, there are a lot more people falling by the wayside in terms of following Donald Trump. I think two things are happening. I think there are people on the Democratic side, and I've seen a story about this, that will say they vote for Biden, but behind closed doors, they're worried because he's so old. Now, Donald Trump's old too. A lot of these motherfuckers are old, except Vivek Ramaswamy, but he's just a dumb fuck. So yeah, go ahead, put him up. He doesn't have a prayer. But I think there's a lot more separation in the support for Donald Trump than the media lets on. And the reason they don't let on to it is because, frankly, it's not good business to suggest that Biden will win in a landslide or whatever. And I don't know if he will win in a landslide, but I have a sense he might. But there's no money in it to own up to that. So they will kind of fudge or tell you what they want to tell you in order to keep you engaged and keep you excited. But Jeff, when you drive around and you see far less signs and flags and such, I think that is a legitimate data point. It just is. If for no other reason, it says the enthusiasm level is down, and that makes a difference. So I appreciate the input, and I agree with you. I think people in the media, people in our politics make too much out of this alleged close race because it's not close. All right. The next email says, what do you think about this idea? Once Trump is convicted in the insurrection trial, the court mandates that Trump must video record a statement and also publish it on all of his social media pages. And the statement would include the following details. Confirm that he lost the 2020 election fair and square. Number 2, confirm that he led the insurrection and apologizes to all people and their families that were hurt/died. He also must pay for the funerals for anyone that has died as a result of the insurrection. Number 3, ask the Trumplefucks to put down their hate and guns and do not attack anyone ever. Ask the Trumplefucks to follow him in upholding the Constitution and supporting the democracy. Number 5, he is dissolving the MAGA movement. Everything would be written by the prosecution, and he cannot add anything. Coach Dave. Well, Dave, I think it sounds like a perfect idea. And I also think riding unicorns through a fucking meadow would be beautiful too. Donald Trump is never going to admit to anything, even if he's convicted, because the moment he's convicted, he's going to be trying to do appeals and whatever. You have to understand Donald Trump's mentality. He is a narcissist. He is incapable of admitting he's wrong. He will say he's right, and he will never confess, not on purpose. Certainly by accident, he does it all the time, but he will never admit it. And he will never go to those people. And I'll tell you what, even if he did that, those people wouldn't believe it. They'll just say, oh, they're just forcing Donald Trump to say that. We don't believe it a minute. We stand by our Lord and Savior. It's a great idea, Coach Dave. It'll never happen. It'll never happen because we're dealing with what you're suggesting is bringing logic to the table, giving them facts and evidence and showing it and assuming they'll say, oh shit, we were all wrong. Donald Trump just told us. You don't really think that's the way it's going to go, do you? These fuckers will never change their minds. The only thing that can fix this is get enough power and enough support and send those fuckers back under the rocks where they started from and where they came out from. See, that's what I've been saying. You know, when you talk about racism, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Racism was almost accepted back in those days. You know, somebody could say the N-word and it wasn't the most horrific thing. It was just day-to-day talk. And as I look back at that, I think, fuck, that's appalling. But that's the way it was. Those people, their parents, their grandparents from that era, taught their kids and their grandkids all the same shit. And for whatever reason, they haven't evolved into a higher vibration, if you will, to understand what's true and what's humane. Since the 60s to now, put it to you this way, I've said this before, between the 60s and 2015, before Donald Trump hit the scene, people would say, you know, racism's getting better. Anti-Semitism is getting better. Misogyny is getting better because you didn't see it as much. And there seems to be some norms to stop people from doing it. The fact of the matter is, it never got better. It never got better. It just got pushed further and further under rocks. Up until the time Donald Trump came out and made it cool to be racist, misogynistic, and anti-Semitic. So they were always there. They just hid because they would not be accepted in polite society until Donald Trump. So if what you're trying to do here is convince these people of what's right, what's fair, what's decent, I don't think it's going to work. It won't change them at all. I mean, frankly, if Donald Trump goes far off of what they believe, they'll just go against Donald Trump. They're still going to believe what they believe and do the things they do. The only thing we can do is push them back under the rocks and try to keep them there as long as we can. Nice thought, Coach Dave, but I don't think it'll work. And over and above that, there is no way Donald Trump will ever admit he's wrong or do this. And if he does do this, they will think he was coerced, so they won't buy it. All right. I've got a email from Old Soul. We all love emails from Old Soul. She says, hey, Boomer, it's been a busy couple of weeks, but like my grandmother would say, there's work to be done. I can always sleep when I'm dead, LOL. The House of Representatives has been causing a lot of noise. That's nothing new, but they've been in rare form these last couple of weeks with the whole impeachment hearings debacle, add the Trump New York civil trial, including his toddler tantrums, into the mix, and the noise reached next level octaves. It's been an emotional roller coaster and a bit comical at times. The Republican drama can't be scripted, literally. You can't make this shit up. She said stuff. I said shit. I think she meant shit. However, I would like to remind everyone not to become too distracted and become immune to what women and young girls are going through each and every day in this country. A 10-year-old girl is in Georgia is the mother of a 9-month-old baby. When her father went to prison, his cousin moved into her home and started dating her mother. At the same time, he started to assault her. During a sex ed class in school, she realized what he was doing to her was wrong and told her teachers. He was arrested and the girl was removed from the home. Unfortunately, she started her period early, and after being removed from the home and examined, it was found out that she was pregnant. Now, At the tender age of 10, she is now a mother. My niece will be 10 next month, and I cannot imagine that happening to her. This weekend, I picked her up for some fun with her favorite TT. While in Target, she grabbed my hands and pulled me towards the Halloween section. As I took her hand, I realized just how tiny her hands and fingers are. I saw her eyes lighting up with excitement, staring at the decorations and gadgets. I couldn't help but think about that little girl in Georgia, and it completely broke my heart. If your listeners want to read the full article, they can go to 11alive.com or on the 11 Alive YouTube page. They can find that article on the community tab from October 1st titled Sophie's Nightmare. When Ed was last on the podcast, he said he believes his state is a test subject for the dismantling of schools. But it's not just in his area, because not only are they banning and burning books, there's a push throughout the entire country to stop teaching of sex ed. The 10-year-old child from Georgia would not have become aware what was happening to her if sex ed wasn't being taught in school. In addition to this, the banning of mifepristone and misoprostol, abortion pills, will be in front of the Supreme Court this cycle. The Supreme Court cycle is going to be a nightmare, but I'm almost worried about the banning of these medications. Also, they'll be reviewing the Zaki Rahimi case, deciding whether or not it's unconstitutional to be unable to possess a firearm while under a restraining order. Rahimi, from the state of Texas, abused his girlfriend, but by the grace of God, she was able to escape the abusive relationship. Unfortunately, he was able to track her down and tried to kidnap her child. When a pedestrian stepped in to help, Rahimi then threatened the pedestrian with a gun. After that, he ran from the police and went on a violent rampage where people were injured. His fight to be allowed to once again carry his gun, even though he still has a restraining order against him, will now be decided in Supreme Court. It's incomprehensible that after all the progress women have made when it comes to domestic violence, that at the behest of a dangerous man, our protections can be taken away with a simple stroke of a pen. Getting domestic violence protections isn't something I would have never thought would happen, not even in a million years. I don't know what's going to happen to domestic violence victims when their ex-partners can walk into a gun shop and legally purchase a firearm. I know what it's like to be paralyzed with fear, but it's 10 times worse when you know an abuser is armed if they overturn this law. More women will fear leaving. They will not risk something happening to them and their children being left behind at the mercy of an abuser. We can't become too distracted or numb ourselves to just how dangerous it is for women and girls in this country. It's an all-out assault on women, and they need protection, and they need to be able to live and tell their stories. We can't allow their voices to be drowned out by Republicans and their antics. It's simply not an option. I appreciate you reading my email, and please let anyone know who is listening and is in this situation or knows someone who is. Please reach out for help. You can call the domestic abuse hotline 24/7. The number is 800-799-7233. Once again, the number is 800-799-7233, or text START to 88788. Text 88788 and put in the text START. There's help available, and you are worthy of a happy life free of fear and violence. People truly to care, I know, because I'm only one of many who care. Thanks, Boomer. That's Old Soul. And I will say this about Old Soul. She she does more than her share. I've talked to Old Soul a few times. I don't know her well yet. I presume ultimately I will. But when I hear some of the stories that she does, she takes in women from other states, red states that need an abortion, and she will bring them into her home and they will stay with her and she will take care of them. That's the one thing about this world. There's a lot of people who feel sorry and have compassion for people in trouble, but there's only a small percentage of people that will actually make the effort and step forward and do something. And Old Soul is one of those people. So thank you, Old Soul. I'm going to give the domestic abuse hotline number again, 800-799-7233, or text START to 88788. Like she says, there is help available, and nobody should be in that situation. And I get Old Soul's concern here. It does appear to be an attack on people of color and women in general. Just the overturning of Roe v. Wade was the first step. But once they broke that barrier, it seems like they're not going to stop. They're going to continue to do it. They want to overturn Roe v. Wade, but they want everybody to have guns. And we know what happens when there's an opportunity for everybody to have guns. We've seen it in Florida. We've seen it in Tennessee. We've seen it all over the country, and it happens all too often. Those are mass shootings. The stories we don't hear as much about are, as Old Soul says, the domestic violence, where there's one man and one woman, and the woman ends up dead because the man is a fucking nutcase. My mom and dad, when I was really little, I presumed they had a normal marriage and all that stuff. It wasn't ultimately when I found out later on. And later on, I found out that my father was a bit abusive to my mother. And that was really the breaking point for me. After that, any love I had for my father or any concern I had for my father, that coupled with all the other things he was doing and did to her and did to me, I couldn't, there was no love lost there. You understand? It wasn't that I hated the guy. People always said, you can't hate your dad for the rest of your life. I don't. He was inconsequential. After he was gone, he's done. He's over. And what's weird about that is I told you back last year that my father died, and my grandmother's wishes were that she and my grandfather and her two sons, my dad and my uncle, were buried in the same spot in northern Minnesota. When he passed away, we had him cremated, and it was still kind of cold, so we had to wait till things warmed up. And then we had to get somebody to dig the hole and somebody to inscribe the stone and all that stuff. So it's not till now that we're getting to it. And next weekend, my brother and I, maybe my wife too, and my brother's wife are going to go up and bury his ashes with my grandparents and my uncle. Now, I don't feel any responsibility to my father in this situation, but I do feel responsibility to my grandmother's wishes, who wanted it that way. So my brother and I kind of like, we really hadn't talked to our father in 20 years. We were not fans based on everything we learned about him, especially those experiences with the abuse with my mother. I don't feel any responsibility, but we do have a responsibility to see to my grandmother's wishes. So we're going to do that. I only wish I knew what was going on when it was going on. I didn't know till after the fact. As I got older and bigger, I could have maybe done something about it. But by that time, he was kind of in and out of the house. He wasn't always there, and the relationship was pretty much done. But when we're talking about domestic abuse, it is absolutely devastating to a family. And it happens far too much. far too much. Not only the suffering and the pain that the women go through, but to have kids be part of that, to witness it, to be involved in it. That is about the saddest thing I can ever imagine. I remember being a young kid, hearing these fights and such, and it was scary when you're a little kid. You're 7, 8 years old. You don't know what the fuck to do. But if that's all you know, you presume that that is normal. I tell people, my dad was not the greatest guy. He was a little volatile. He would yell and scream and say horrible things to his kids. So later on, when I started meeting my friend's dad, I assumed that they were all the same. When I found out they weren't, then I thought, you motherfucker. That's when I truly came to feel the way I felt about my father. Life is so hard. Life is so difficult. These kinds of situations where our government makes it even harder for certain people in this country, that is appalling. And I don't think that we're going to get this fixed or rectified until we have enough sense of in kicking out these people that perpetuate this bullshit. So unfortunately, we may have to wait till 2024, and that's only assuming if the people of this country do what they should do based on what we know now about the Republican Party. And if they do that, and we get the majority in the House and the Senate, and of course the presidency, we can get some changes done. But you need to know, we've been thrown so far into the ditch on this shit. It's not going to happen overnight. I think a lot of people will think once we have control, everything will be better. No, it won't come that quick. It'll take some time. That's why it's important that we all push hard and work hard to make sure these changes are made. At the very least, we as a people should do all we can to make sure women and domestic violence and kids involved in the same things are protected. That's the very least we could do. If you're a man or a woman, that should be job number one. And of course, Republicans don't care about that. So we have to extricate them from our government because they will always be a stumbling block to this. So, Old Soul, thank you very much for your email. As always, you send us a good message, certainly something to think about. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. All right, here is a rare event. This rare event is when a Republican makes a threat and actually follows through with it. Now, this person making the threat and following through with it is probably ill-advised and he will probably fail, but we know that's not a thing for Republicans. They fail constantly and they keep doing the same shit over and over again. But Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida on Monday followed through on his threat to try to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Gaetz announced Monday evening on the House floor that he had filed a resolution that could force a no confidence vote on McCarthy this week. Now, Gaetz suggested that he didn't care if the resolution failed to actually remove McCarthy from his job. And he said this for a very good reason, because he knows it's probably going to fail. In order for it to pass, he needs 218 votes in the House. You presume the Republicans will be the only ones voting on this issue. Why would Democrats vote for Kevin McCarthy? So if it's just Republicans, the fact is there isn't 218 people that will vote with Matt Gaetz on this. And he knows that. That's why he says, I don't care if it fails. It reminds me of being a kid in school. There was always this little scrawny, wiry kid that would say, I'll fight anybody. I don't care if I get my ass kicked. Well, I was a bigger guy and I didn't lose too many fights because I didn't fuck with people who kicked my ass. But I got to tell you, every fight I ever got into, I cared about getting my ass kicked, because if you've ever gotten your ass kicked, you know it hurts. Anyway, he said, Matt Gaetz said, at this point next week, one of two things will happen. Kevin McCarthy won't be the Speaker of the House, or he'll be the Speaker of the House working at the pleasure of Democrats. Gaetz told reporters afterward, I'm at peace with either result because the American people deserve to know who governs them. Isn't this so typical of the Republicans? They can walk into a situation knowing they're going to lose, but for performative reasons, to just create a shit show, they're going to do it knowing that they're going to lose. It's a big waste of time. It's an exercise in futility. And this is all the Republicans do, like the impeachment hearings for Joe Biden. Nothing came out of it. It didn't make any big news. They looked silly. They were embarrassed, but still, they're going to do it again. So it's an interesting circumstance here. Matt Gaetz also said that I'll ask for a vote every other day if I have to, just to cause chaos and confusion in the House of Representatives. Good idea. You guys have had the position, the majority in the House for 2.5 years, have accomplished zero. Well, you did raise the debt ceiling, but that was with the help of the Democrats. And you did pass this continuing resolution, but with the help of the Democrats. Isn't this ironic that the Republicans wanted so badly to get the majority because of all the things they could do, but the only things they've accomplished, they could only accomplish if the Democrats helped out? So who's actually running the House of Representatives? Ain't Matt Gaetz. Now, of course, Gaetz is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, one of the loudest Donald Trump supporters there are on Capitol Hill, and a major attention speaker. That's what this is all about. This is for Matt Gaetz to get attention, trying to look tough because apparently he wants to run for governor of Florida. I dare say after this is all said and done, I don't think Matt Gaetz is going to be able to run for anything. For the past week, Washington has watched and waited as the Florida Republican repeated his threats, which he's been making since January, to make his move against McCarthy. These threats started when Kevin McCarthy was elected after 15 votes. This threat has always been held over Kevin McCarthy's head. And this is why he always bows and scrapes to the Freedom Caucus. McCarthy doesn't have any balls. He's ineffective. He's not too bright. And this is why the House of Representatives has accomplished nothing in 2.5 years. Now, speaking from the Capitol steps at the center of a crowd of reporters, Gaetz claimed McCarthy has breached an agreement he struck with his fellow Republicans when he put himself forward for the speakership earlier this year. Top grievances: that the House hasn't passed bills individually funding federal agencies, and that McCarthy prevented the federal government from shutting down last week by allowing the chamber to vote on a government funding bill that drew support from Democrats. Well, thank God it fucking did. Gaetz also claimed McCarthy had struck a secret side deal with the Democrats to allow a vote on more military assistance for Ukraine, which McCarthy denied earlier on Monday. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. McCarthy was out of bullets when he struck this relatively clean continuing resolution. He had nothing. He had no power. He had nothing. He needed the Democrats. And in this continuing resolution, there was no mention of money for Ukraine. And we know that the United States of America and Joe Biden and the Democrats aren't going to leave Ukraine twisting in the wind. We know it's important that we help fund Ukraine so we can beat back Russians, because if we don't, then next up they might be going after NATO countries. So this is important for us to do. Now, McCarthy said, Gaetz says a lot of things that aren't true. Well, no shit. There's a lot of things that all Republicans say that aren't true. Now, Gaetz denied having any personal beef with McCarthy. He thought that they've certainly feuded. Well, if you remember when they had the vote for McCarthy to become the Speaker of the House, remember when McCarthy walked up to Matt Gaetz, clearly was threatening him in some way, and Gaetz was kind of cowing away from this and ultimately did what he needed to do by voting present, and McCarthy won just barely. Now, McCarthy reportedly told Gaetz to get a life, for instance, when he saw him ask a young White House aide to help him find his cabin one night during a 2019 retreat at Camp David in Maryland. Talking about Cassidy Hutchinson, when Matt Gaetz was kind of trying to hit on her at Camp David. And then when presented with that story, he said, well, you know, Cassidy and I dated for a couple of months. And then Cassidy came out and said, yeah, that's bullshit. I never dated that creepy motherfucker. Now, House rules allow a single lawmaker to file a resolution declaring the Speaker's office vacant, meaning McCarthy would be stripped of his gavel if a majority of the House members voted for the resolution, because the resolution is privileged. According to the rules, the Speaker has to schedule a vote within 2 days, but the resolution will not necessarily get a vote. A majority of Republicans likely oppose ousting McCarthy, and it's possible they could either get enough support from Democrats to block the resolution from the floor or get enough Democrats to support reelecting McCarthy as Speaker. If the Speaker's office is declared vacant, then the House has to elect a Speaker with a majority vote, a process that took, 15 fucking tries. And there is nobody else in the Republican Party that has the ability to get 218 votes. So what is going to happen? I personally think if the Democrats just stay out of it, vote present, or don't vote at all, let the Republicans fight it out, it won't pass and things will go on as normal. Now, you might say to yourself, well, why not kick McCarthy out of there? Well, the devil you don't know may be worse than the devil you do. We got about a year and a half. We know what we've got with Kevin McCarthy. We know he's weak. And we know he bends to the Democrats from time to time because he gets himself in trouble. So why not stick with that? Why not? But if we leave it to the Republicans, there's no way Matt Gaetz gets 218 votes. It's just not possible. So maybe we do that. Now, AOC was talking. Somebody asked her, is anybody on the Democratic side going to help retain Kevin McCarthy, or on the other side, take him out of there? And AOC basically said, I don't know why we would have anything to do with Kevin McCarthy or the Republicans' problems. She said, however, if we did do something, whether to vote against or for him, there would have to be some kind of recompense, you know? They're not going to do it for nothing. And I agree with them. Some of the things that would be worth talking about is, well, Kevin, we'll save your ass, but let's make sure this appropriations and these bills pass in November and we just get this fucking thing done. And Kevin McCarthy will go out and talk shit and say all the things he says. But when it comes down to it, like he did with the debt ceiling and this last time with the continuing resolution. He caves because he has no other choice. Now, the thing about it is one of the reasons we want to make sure that Kevin McCarthy stays in there is so that we can get things done. The Speaker of the House leads the House, presents the bills that are voted on, right? If you don't have a Speaker of the House, you can't do that. You think the Republicans haven't done anything? Just wait until you don't have a Speaker of the House, especially one that you can manipulate, meaning the Democrats. We still got to vote on this stuff. We still got to get this stuff pushed through in 45 days in mid-November. And if we don't, then the country shuts down again. So I think it's in our best interest to keep Kevin McCarthy in there. He's too stupid to be dangerous. They've accomplished nothing. Why not just maintain what's been going on there up to this point? Now, all year, Gaetz has talked a lot about overthrowing McCarthy, but less about who would replace him. He suggested Monday that he wouldn't mind seeing Representative Steve Scalise, currently McCarthy's top deputy, taking the gavel. However, Steve Scalise he's a Trump piece of shit too, but over and above that, we just found out that Steve Scalise has cancer, and we don't know to what degree he has cancer. I mean, Jamie Raskin had cancer too, and I believe he's gotten through it. But Steve Scalise, you're going to take a guy for the last year and a half in the House of Representatives, put him in charge, who is a Trump humper and has health problems. Well, let's put it this way. Steve Scalise might be the heir apparent, but he still has to get 218 votes to get voted in. I guarantee it'll take you more than 15 times, and he may not get voted in at all. Now, Gaetz said, I would probably vote for at least 100 Republicans in our caucus and maybe 100 other Americans out there who wouldn't necessarily need to be a member of the body to be considered for the speakership, Gaetz said. Okay, so if they kick Gaetz out, then we're going to start hearing this thing again. Oh, we're going to make Donald Trump Speaker of the House. Nah, that's not going to fucking happen. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump attended court today in Manhattan. This is all about Letitia James' lawsuit against him and his sons and Weisselberg and some other people regarding business fraud that's taken place in the Trump organization for literally decades. The evidence is all there. The evidence is so strong that Judge Engoron made a summary judgment saying Donald Trump was in fact liable for all this fraud. So you might ask, why are they going to trial still, which started yesterday? Well, there's a few other issues that have to be presented and have to be decided. And then they have to decide what the penalty is going to be. I think a lot of people think them liquidating and dissolving all these companies is the punishment. It's not. It's just the resolution to the problems Donald Trump created. That's not the punishment phase. The fine is the punishment phase, and being put in a position where you can no longer do business in New York. Those are the punishment phases, and that's what's going on. Donald Trump showed up in court today, which surprised a lot of people, kind of surprised me until I heard this story. You may know that Donald Trump is suing Michael Cohen for $500 million. Well, Michael Cohen has had his checkered past, but he's not a dumb lawyer. So he said, well, okay, Donnie, you want to sue me? I want to depose you. Donnie does not want that. He does not want some guy who knows everything about him deposing him. So Donnie tried to slip out of it. And he was supposed to get deposed, I think, today by Michael Cohen. But now, by going to this trial, he has a legitimate excuse for not being deposed. Leave it to Donnie to delay the inevitable. He's going to end up dropping that lawsuit because there's nothing to it. He can't win. And Michael Cohen will have done the job that he was supposed to do. So Donald Trump goes into court today. He's real crabby. He's real defiant. He sat through hours of sometimes testy opening statements Monday in the lawsuit. We saw some pictures of him or some video of him before the trial started. There's not going to be cameras in the trial while the trial's going on, but you will see things as he comes out of the courtroom and stuff. There'll be some video. And of course, we'll hear about all that happens in the trial from the reporters that are in the courtroom. This is going to be very interesting because there's going to be a lot of evidence that's revealed, and it's going to be bad for Donald Trump. I think the thing that's most concerning to Donald Trump is that he will be exposed for not being as wealthy as he says he is. And it's because he's a narcissist. His money, his power, his prestige, and his property are what defines him. That's really all that matters. Donnie's all about perception. And once this stuff is revealed, that perception will be gone. And for all intents and purposes, so does the legend of Donald Trump. The thing that he spent so long and worked so hard to build up will be gone. Now, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to discredit this case, which seems pointless because he's already lost. The judge already made the summary judgment. But he goes outside the courtroom at breaks or afterwards, and he declared during a lunch break, "This is a disgraceful trial," after listening to lawyers for New York Attorney General Letitia James basically excoriate him as a habitual liar. The state's lawsuit accuses Donald Trump and his company of deceiving banks, insurers, and others by misstating his wealth for years in final statements. We know he did that because the judge found him liable of doing just that before they even went to trial. So he's done. Kevin Wallace, one of the lawyers for Letitia James, says they were lying year after year after year. And this was being said as Trump sat across the table. He looked straight ahead, arms crossed, facing away from a screen that showed details of Wallace's presentation. Now, defense lawyers in response said the financial statements were legitimate. Trump's holdings were Mona Lisa properties that can command top dollar, attorney Alina Habba said. Mona Lisa properties. Oh, of course, all of Donald Trump's properties are more special than anybody else's. Baba Arhaba said, "This is not fraud. This is real estate," she said, accusing the Attorney General's office of setting a very dangerous precedent for all business owners in the state of New York. Let me tell you something. If all businesses in real estate do what Donald Trump did, they should all be taken down. They should all be fined. They should all be put out of business. It's like committing a crime and saying, well, everybody else is doing it, whether it's true or not. Trump voluntarily attended a trial that he called a sham, a scam, and a continuation of the single greatest witch hunt of all time. This is interesting. Alina Habba, the lawyer. I like to call her defense attorney Barbie. She basically said, well, she got a little heated. It got a little animated, and she was talking loud to the judge. And the judge basically said, not in these words, of course, because he was more professional, but in my words, he said, "Chill, bitch. You don't talk that loud in my courtroom." Again, he didn't exactly say it that way, but that's what he meant. Then Alina Habba started complaining about, we don't even have a jury here. Donald Trump was outside of the courtroom at the break. He says, it's shameful that we don't have a jury in this trial. Well, the reason they don't have a jury is because Alina Habba fucked up. If you want a jury in a civil lawsuit in New York, you got to ask for it. Now, when she was filling out the paperwork, this incredible lawyer, there was a box that had to be checked if you wanted a jury. And Alina Habba, whatever the fuck her name is, didn't check the box. She fucked up. So there is no jury. There isn't going to be a jury. And that's my point. Donald Trump is outside the courtroom. He sits there stoically, or stoically as he can. And then when he walks outside the courtroom, he talks shit about the judge. Well, if you don't have a jury, who decides anything in this case? It's that judge, the one that's already made a summary judgment against Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is talking shit about him at every turn. Donald Trump has to be the dumbest fucking human being in the history of Earth. Now, she went on to say, is what we have here is an attempt. No, Donald said this. What we have here is an attempt to hurt me in an election, he said outside the court, adding, I don't think the people of this country are going to stand for it. Well, they have so far, Donnie. You kept thinking they're going to come to Manhattan, they're going to come to Georgia, they're going to come to Florida. Nobody fucking showed up. So I think they will stand for it. Now, when Trump was walking out at lunchtime, he sneered at James as he passed her on his way. She took her turn too, and as she was walking out of court for the break, she left smiling like a Cheshire cat. That had to piss off Donnie Trump, having a woman of color kick in his dirty diaper ass. But you know what Donald Trump did? I think Donald Trump knows he already lost this case and there's nothing he could do to change that. Hopefully he's smart enough to understand that. But he's doing all these things for a very good reason, a reason that probably won't surprise you. He's doing it because the moment he stepped out and started talking, his campaign immediately began fundraising off the appearance. Trying to make some money. Got to get that coin. Now, Judge Arthur Engoron ruled last week that Trump committed fraud in the business dealings. That's a done deal. If upheld on an appeal, the ruling could force Trump to give up New York properties, including Trump Tower, Wall Street office building, golf courses, and a suburban estate. Trump has called it a corporate death penalty and insisted that the judge is unfair and out to get him. Well, he's out to get you because you're a fucking criminal. Bottom line. Now, this trial concerns 6 remaining claims in the lawsuit, including allegations of conspiracy, falsifying business records, and insurance fraud. It is a non-jury trial, which Engoron said was legally required when a suit seeks not only money, but a court order setting out something a defendant must do or not do. As we know, Letitia James is asking for $250 million. And we know that Donald Trump inflated his wealth by $3.6 billion. So what that basically means is when the actual amount is decided, it's probably going to be a lot higher than $250 million. And frankly, whether it's $100 million or $2 billion, Donald Trump ain't got the money. That's why he's fucking fundraising. He's trying to get some money together to save his life. But things have been kind of falling away as far as his fundraising. He's not doing as well as he once did. He's sure as hell not going to get $250 million in grift money when he puts out this information to his MAGA fucks. They just don't have that kind of money, and they don't have the ability to pull it together in that short a time. All right. Bernie Kerik, former police commissioner of New York, also a Trump humper. We're hearing now that he could deliver the goods for prosecutors on indicted MAGA lawyer and accused election equipment tamperer Sidney Powell. She argued that former Trump attorney Tim Parlatore on CNN Monday, who now represents Kerik, provided he gets an immunity deal. Now, keep in mind, Bernie Kerik has already been pardoned by Donald Trump once. Now he wants an immunity deal to go to trial and testify against Sidney Powell. Will he get that immunity deal? Maybe. I hope he doesn't. I don't think they need it against Sidney Powell. I mean, frankly, Sidney Powell is more valuable as a witness against Donald Trump. Instead of getting Kerik to flip on Powell, they're probably working on Powell flipping on Donald Trump. Powell's not going to get away free and clear, but she could maybe lessen her possible sentence when it's all said and done. Bernie Kerik may be too far down the food chain in my mind, but who knows? Jake Tapper said, "You say that Bernie Kerik should be granted immunity in exchange for testifying." Jake Tapper says, "Why? What kind of testimony does he have to offer?" "Sure," says Parlatore. "So, I don't know exactly what they want him to testify about." Yeah, you don't. "But the Fulton County District Attorney's Office reached out to me and they are demanding that he come in and come down and testify." And I said to them, "Look, you have publicly identified him as a co-conspirator, and the Supreme Court case law on this is very clear. When you publicly accuse someone of a crime and then want to compel them to come in and testify, they have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination," which is true. You can do that. He said no competent criminal lawyer would allow him to answer questions. He's going to plead the Fifth. Are you planning on giving him immunity? And this is one thing that I think has been lost today. We didn't ask for immunity, and Mr. Kerik isn't seeking immunity. If they want him to testify, then the hurdle that they have to overcome is immunity so that he won't plead the Fifth. Who doesn't know that? I'm sure Fani Willis knows this. This Tim Parlatore used to be a Trump attorney. He's been on CNN and MSNBC, and he is a prick. He's an absolute piece of shit. I hope they tell him, Kerik is a co-conspirator. He's going on trial. We don't need your fucking testimony. Tell him to get ready for fucking jail. That's what I hope they tell this piece of shit, because he has been nothing but a problem in this country for a long, long time. All right, the last story we'll talk about is one of my favorite people, Lindsey Graham. And guess what Lindsey's doing right now? He's crying and whining again. Apparently, Graham blasted the fraud case Donald Trump is facing in New York and slammed the valuation of the former president's Mar-a-Lago estate. This is so Republican. The judge read something about valuation for taxes and all this sort of stuff, and they can't deal with facts or the truth or the law, so they take something, exaggerate it, and try to make it a thing, which never fucking works. I think I told you this before. Here's the thing. Donald Trump had Mar-a-Lago as a home, and as a private residence, it's worth a lot more than if it was, say, a hotel or a club, which is what he's got. So he himself switched the, I don't know what they call it, changed it from a personal home to a hotel or club or something like that, because that decreased the value, as Donald Trump has been doing with all these things, decreased the value, which decreased the amount of taxes. He went out of his way to make sure that change was made. So as a property that is a hotel or a club, back in 2011, they said, the state of Florida said it was worth $18 million. Later on, it rose and rose. And then I believe right now, according to the state of Florida, that it's worth $27 million. Now, I'll grant you, if it were a private home, it would be worth a lot more. But Donald Trump chose not to do that because he wanted to skate by on less taxes. See, what Donald Trump was going to do, he was going to get this change in taxes. So he paid less taxes. But then he was going to take Mar-a-Lago to banks and insurance companies and say, this thing's worth $1 billion, which is absolutely fucking ridiculous. It's not even close. It may be worth $200 million as a private home. But that's the game Donald Trump is playing. Now, they seem incensed by the fact that the judge just said what the law stated and what the state stated, as opposed to agreeing with Donald Trump's fucking lie. That's their argument. That's how they're going to win this case. And as I've said before, they already lost the case. So it's all for naught. You can make up all this noise, but it's not going to change the fact that he's already been found liable for fraud. Now, Christopher Keiss is one of his lawyers. He said he's made a fortune literally being right about real estate investments. There was no intent to defraud. There's no illegality. There was no default. There was no breach. There was no reliance from his banks. There were no unjust profits, and there were no victims. He was appearing on Hannity. That's what they like to say. There was nobody a victim in these crimes. Well, if you paid less taxes than you should pay, or you got loans based on a value that wasn't true, the banks are victims. The other people that deal with those banks are victims. The state of Florida, the country of the United States, who didn't receive the amount of taxes that they should have received because you're fucking playing games. There's a lot of victims here. It's very interesting to see how they're going about this. They literally have nothing to argue. So they're taking ridiculous shit and trying to argue that. They know, I know, you know, it's not going to work, but they still do it. Now, the lawyer went on to say it's a systematic effort to destroy Donald Trump as a political person, he said. His crime was he was a good conservative president who added $7 trillion, $8 trillion to the debt. That's hardly conservative. I've never seen hatred toward a political figure like I see against Donald Trump. The left will do anything to ruin his life to keep him from being president again. And here's the good news. If you're a conservative, it's not working. You're upset about how much we hate Donald Trump. We just pulled that out of the air. He's a Republican, so Democrats hate him just because he's a Republican. No, that's a Republican game. Democrats don't like him because he's a liar. He's a thief. He's corrupt. He's a treasonist. He incited an insurrection. He stole documents and gave them to other people. He disseminated these documents. This is why we hated him. And if you tell me you've never seen anything at this level, that's because what Donald Trump did, we've never seen at that level. You're getting appropriate reaction for the crimes committed by Donald Trump. So nice try. It won't work. You've already pretty much lost the case, and Donald Trump's financial career is hanging by a thread, and the judge has got a fucking big shears ready to cut that motherfucker. So, yap all you want, but that isn't going to change anything, and it certainly isn't going to save Donald Trump. All right, we're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.